Based on their skin tone, they start to suffer what I identified as PEPS, PEPS syndrome. And that is psychological, emotional, physical, and social well being trauma. What does that basically mean? It means that the individual starts to have all types of psychological issues where they may be depressed, they're stressed, they can be confused. Some even may experience self destructive thoughts, which is very unhealthy. And they also develop what I've identified as either a light skin color complex or a dark skin color complex. So when we're looking at PEP syndrome as a whole, when we look at the emotional trauma from colorism, that's fear. People can be unhappy, they're sad, they feel helpless. There's anger and frustration that sets in, and they feel a sense of humiliation and shame to have someone treat you differently solely based on the lightness or darkness of your skin tone leads that individual not only to psychological, but now we have emotional. Then we go into the physical trauma. What is the physical trauma in the PEP syndrome? It consists of one, the individual suffers from a lack of sleep. They can actually have, and Dr. Ronald Hall has noted this in his research, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, gastrointestinal problems. They begin to suffer from headaches. And they also have what I call appearance issues, meaning that in order for them, they believe in order to be accepted by society, by in order to get jobs, relationships, friendships, to be successful, they feel that they need to bleach or lighten their skin tone so that they will fit in and be more accepted. So that falls under the physical category of the PEP syndrome. Finally, under PEPs, we have the social. The social trauma is exclusion. That individual will be excluded from events, situations in the job, in the workplace, in society in general. They then may become withdrawn, antisocial, and it's a form of self-isolation begins to creep in. It impacts people socially here in the United States, and I would believe also internationally with educational opportunities. There are biases that set in and other forms of discrimination. And they also feel that their voices are silenced. Here in the United States, one of the most disturbing issues involving colorism that leads to this PEP syndrome is the fact that it's blatantly joked about. You will have television shows where you will hear someone say to another individual, "Oh, you act so light skinned," meaning that that individual with the light skin, which is in closer proximity to whiteness, is believed to be acting more white as opposed to if they're Black, Indian, Asian, or Latino. We've also had instances here in the United States where they've held parties at colleges and universities. And in order for darker skinned women to enter the party, they'd have to pay a fee. Lighter skinned women were accepted to enter free. We've had disc jockeys on radio stations who would hold cruises each year, have games where they would pit light skinned people against darker skinned people. And they would make jokes about it. One of the biggest misconceptions with colorism here in the United States is the belief that only darker skinned people are impacted by colorism, and that's not true. People with albinism, especially in South Africa and the African continent, and here in the States, and lighter skinned people are also treated disparately. How does that work? For example, within the Black community, the African American community in the United States, there is this belief that someone who identifies as Black but possesses very fair skin that is in close proximity to whiteness, that they're not deemed as being authentically Black. So they're treated disparately, they're treated differently. When it comes to a darker skinned person, you would have a lighter skinned person treat them disparately because of that dark skin tone. So, what happens when all of this occurs? This is where that PEP syndrome kicks in. When the PEP syndrome kicks in, the individuals, and let me use an example of a darker skinned young lady. She's dark skinned. Her entire life, from childhood into girlhood, her teenage years, and into college, she's treated differently, negatively, discriminated against because of her dark skin color. In the meantime, no one is ever looking at the psychological, emotional, physical, and social trauma that this young lady has been carrying with her from childhood to being an adult woman. And as she grows older, those that I will refer to as PEP syndrome, those PEP's issues begin to impact and affect her self-worth. She begins to have low self-esteem, low self-identity, self-respect, self-pride, and self-love. When those issues kick in, and this is my theory that I'm working on now in the form of a case study, that individual now believes I have no self-worth, I'm not good enough, I'm not enough. In order for me to find employment, to get married, have a boyfriend, to date, to be accepted socially in society, I need to change my skin color to be fair and light. And unfortunately, we have seen instances here in the United States, as well as internationally, where we've seen people who have lightened their skin using bleaching creams and other products. My other theory in working with colorism and the PEP syndrome is that as a result of the PEP syndrome, the individual who has been victimized by colorism develops what I call, and let's say this is a dark-skinned individual, they develop a dark skin inferiority complex, meaning that they place a high value on light skin and a low value on dark skin. That inferiority complex now has made this individual believe I need to bleach my skin. Here in the United States, the bleaching products and skin lightening products industry is in the billions of dollars. I am conducting a study now where I actually walked into a store in New Jersey and I found over 70 skin lightening products in the form of gels, creams, lotions, easily accessible. So I took pictures, which really annoyed the people in the store. But the point here is that this billion-dollar industry also causes health issues for women. Dr. Ronald Hall has noted how some of these skin lightening products have mercury in them, harmful chemicals that end up either in stillborn death, kidney problems, and other health issues. So what we need to do in addressing colorism worldwide, this isn't just the United States issue. We need to look at the trauma, the psychological, emotional, physical, and social trauma that colorism acts cause individuals. Because see, that is the danger. Because remember, that PEP's trauma is something that individuals carry with them throughout their lifetimes. And it does impact them. It impacts how they view themselves, their self-worth, whether or not they think they are actually good enough to be accepted. So globally, I am working on starting a movement called the Authentically Me movement through the Colorism Project, which I'm the founder. working with Dr. Neha Mishra, Dr. Ronald Lee Hall, and Dr. Lena Sharda. And we have the Colorism Institute. Our focus is going to send the global message that to be authentic in who you are, regardless of your skin tone, shade, or complexion. In the United States, there is an issue where they are denying DEI. It's an anti-DEI focus in a lot of its states. The problem here is that colorism is not discussed. It's not talked about. It's ignored. It is an issue that we know it exists. We have laws here in the United States where if you discriminate against someone based on their skin color or the skin color of their spouse within the work environment, charges can get filed. But here's the problem. The bulk of employers are clueless as to what colorism is. Up until a few years ago, the justice system here, the court system, did not understand or did not believe that two people belonging to the same racial group could discriminate against each other based on the color, the lightness or darkness of their skin tone. So when we talk about intra-racial colorism, we're talking about, for example, we can have two people who are Indian treat each other differently based on the lightness or darkness of their skin tone. Interracial colorism, an example would be a white person, white American or white person in general, treating a Black or brown person, Asian, Latino, Indian, differently and discriminating against them because of the lightness or darkness of their skin tone. So we have intraracial colorism, which is within the race, and we have interracial, which means outside of that race. And it occurs a lot. There's so many equal employment opportunity cases here in the United States. The United States has established what's called the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And they're there. So when this discrimination occurs in the workplace, and the individual knows that they've been discriminated against because of their skin color, they go and file a claim. If the investigation proves that there is colorism, skin color discrimination, the charge is filed, the employer is sued, and from that point on, they pay a financial penalty for that. And they're also required to implement training. My point here, everyone, is for the world to understand that colorism is not something we can just say, oh, it's a light skin issue, it's a dark skin issue, it's a medium skin tone issue. No, it's bigger than that because it causes psychological, emotional, physical, and social well-being trauma. And what happens, and this is why it's so important for all of us to understand this, as I noted earlier, people carry this trauma from childhood to adulthood. We have children, and I'll share this with you quickly. A little Black girl, 5 years old, in school. She was scratching her leg, and the teacher asked her, "Why are you scratching your leg? Does it itch?" She told the teacher, "No." The teacher asked her, "Does your leg hurt?" "No." So when she said, "Do you want some lotion for your leg?" the little girl responded, "No." So when the teacher said, "Well, then why are you continuing to scratch your leg?" And the little girl was very dark. So she had scratched her leg to the point that the skin had turned ashy white. And her response was, "Because when I scratch it, it doesn't look black." That's psychological trauma, everyone. The child is suffering emotional trauma, the physical trauma, and the overall well-being issues are really serious. I'll take it a step further. I was recently a professor in a university here in the United States. One of my students wrote that she's a dark-skinned girl, and her whole life, since she was a little girl, she wanted to change her skin color to be light-skinned because she was the darkest one in her family. And she felt that she was ugly because of the dark skin. Another example, a 10-year-old girl who was my neighbor's granddaughter years ago had a crush on a boy at school. And she was a very dark brown skinned little girl. And the little boy was very fair skinned. And he told her one day, I like you. And I think you're really cute, but I can't be your boyfriend because you stayed in the oven too long. Can you imagine that type of trauma for little girls? Then they go into high school and they don't get picked for dates or proms or parties because the bulk of the young men wanted to date lighter skinned women, lighter skinned girls or teenagers. Again, there's more trauma that they're dealing with. So what we need to do is have a campaign so that we can say to these young women and young men globally, there's nothing wrong with you having darker skin tone than somebody else. Whether you have a lighter skin tone, we need to warn them of the harm of bleaching and skin lightening products and say to young women, have them learn to develop a high level of self-esteem, self-respect, self-pride, self-identity. When we do this, in turn, we are now combating and stomping out the colorism issue. The media in the United States glorifies lighter skin. There was just a video on TikTok the other day where they noted the most beautiful Black women actresses in the United States, and they were all light skinned. There was not one woman with brown skin. So we have to move society to a point where everyone's skin tone and skin color is embraced, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, where you come from, where you live. It is important for us to understand that the psychological, emotional, physical, and social traumas of colorism can be devastating to such a degree that little girls turn into teenagers who turn into women who are walking around with PEPS issues their entire lives. And when they develop that dark skin inferiority complex, or it could be a light skin inferiority complex, that's all because of the psychological traumas they're suffering through. So we need to understand that we don't judge people based on how light or dark they are. Their worth is not valued by the lightness or darkness of their skin tone. And until we, and when I say we, the global community realizes this, we're going to continue on the same path where people are treated differently because they're dark, where people with albinism are treated negatively and discriminated against because they have albinism. So what is the bottom line? The bottom line is, I believe, in my research and the book that I'm writing now, we need a global campaign, authentically me, where people can feel that they can be their authentic selves, where they realize that the value and their self-worth is everything, and that your skin color is not a determining factor of whether you have any worth of value in any society on this planet. So with that, I would like to wrap it up and say that we need to warn people about skin bleaching. We need to focus more on diversity, equity, and inclusion globally, because colorism is a diversity issue. Skin color discrimination hurts, traumatizes, and as I noted to you earlier, leaves severe scars. So having said that, this concludes my presentation. Are there any questions?
For that impactful presentation, your dedication to addressing colorism and its effects is commendable. Your work on the deep psychological and emotional impacts of colorism has shed important lights on these critical issues. If anyone has questions or would like to add it to the discussion, please feel free to ask.
Why do some people choose skin bleaching, in your opinion?
I believe they choose the skin bleaching because from a psychological, from the PEP syndrome standpoint, they believe that if their skin is lighter, that they will be accepted more so in society as far as employment, of getting a job, finding a mate, a spouse, for marriage, have a larger social circle, and because they think they'll be deemed beautiful. Why? Because of this ideology that in order for someone to be deemed pretty and acceptable and nice looking and desirable, that their skin needs to be in closest proximity to whiteness. And it is that, unfortunately, that dog belief. So they think that, in my professional opinion and review, and based on my research, once they bleach their skin, I'm now one of you. I belong. You can't knock me. You can't reject me because now that I'm light, I'm going to be more desirable. I'm going to stand a better chance of getting a job or finding a husband or a wife. And unfortunately, that's why they do it. And I think it's also deeply rooted in the psyche with that psychological, emotional, physical, and social trauma. Because remember, they go through stages. It's the experience of colorism. That experience of colorism leads to the PEP syndrome. That PEP syndrome leads to them believing that I don't have any value or self-worth. Their self-esteem falls low. And then at that point, they develop these skin color complexes where they believe, well, if I'm lighter, I see how lighter skinned people are treated in society. And I want to be accepted and treated that way. So this is how that cycle works. So once they have that skin color complex, they're placing a higher value on light skin and a low value on dark skin. So if I bleach my skin lighter, where I already place that high value, I'm going to be more accepted and beautiful and everything. We've seen commercials. I think it's Fair and Lovely, where they'll say the commercial basically says in so many words, do you want to be beautiful? Do you want to find a spouse? Then try this product. So when that PEP syndrome kicks in and those skin color complexes kick in, then they go to that skin bleaching.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Anyone else who would like to ask any question?
I have a question.
Okay.
What role do cultural narrative play in shaping attitude towards skin color?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Do cultural narratives play in shaping attitudes towards skin color?
The attitudes. Did she
Yes.
say changing the attitudes towards skin color?
Yes.
I think the only way we could change attitudes about skin color is, as I noted earlier, having this global campaign. My goal is to launch in 2025 a global campaign where we feature women and men of all different skin tones, light, medium, dark, in between skin tones, where we are embracing them and they're talking about how they feel about who they are and their skin color, where we send a loud message through videos, TikTok, Facebook, all social media, where we establish connections in every country. And we blow this campaign up to such a degree that it's going to send a message to the world, the global arena, that regardless of how light or dark someone is, they have just as much value and worth as the next guy. The only way we can change the attitudes is by standing in numbers, by continuing like the conferences, like this conference, for example, this entire session. Each year we have the Ronald E. Hall Conference on Colorism. Dr. Lena Charter, who's here with us today, works with us in all of our projects. Our goal is to have a global connection where we have people from every country, continent on this planet working with us. And there's power in numbers. When you see a global group of individuals taking a stand against an issue and we get traction, especially using social media, we believe that's going to change the attitudes in this country and internationally. It'll change, hopefully, your neighbor, or if a young lady likes a young man, it maybe make him see, well, you know what? I shouldn't judge Donna because of Donna's skin color. It's all about changing their beliefs and their perceptions. And that is the way we get to that attitude change. If we don't do this, 10, 15, 20 years from now, we're still going to be dealing with the same ugly issue.
I'm Professor Dr. Naila Riaz, and I'm really taken by your thought when you said that colorism is diversification. Yes, the philosophy behind colorism is beyond dermal sciences. And if this philosophy is attached with dermal sciences and the skin connects, that would be better to nourish the talent and to nurture the future tasks. Thank you very much. It was enlightening to know.
Thank you. You're welcome. And I also wanted to add for everyone that I think it's important also for dermatologists worldwide that if somebody walks into your office and other than them having maybe a spot from a blemish or maybe some trauma to their skin, and they are seeking a skin lightening product with a prescription, I think it's important for the dermal community to stop and conduct a thorough psychological, emotional, physical, and social well-being evaluation of that individual. Because if I walked into, let's say, Dr. Sharda's office and said, Dr. Sharda, I've had a blemish here and the spot won't go away. I want it to be even to my skin tone. Dr. Sharda should then say, wait a minute, Donna, let me evaluate Donna. And she should have a checklist, a form, something that'll let her do a what I call PEP syndrome evaluation to see, does Donna want this product because Donna wants to bleach her skin lighter? Or is Donna really concerned about that one little spot? And that one little spot is very visible. And I think in the dermal field, and I'm willing to work with anyone who's interested in doing this, so please feel free to reach out to me, that there needs to be a connection before these products, prescriptions are written. I think that in the dermal field, there needs to be a focus on that PEP's well-being of individuals as to why they want to be lighter. So those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Donnamaria.
What is your opinion about people who genuinely have the desire to have fairer skin? And what's the first step towards dealing with them and healing them?
I think the first thing is to understand what is the underlying reason why this individual desires lighter skin. And again, it takes me back to my PEP syndrome. Has there been psychological trauma from childhood through whatever age they are at that point? Is it emotional? Is it an emotional issue? Is it a social issue? Is it physical? Well, we know it's physical because they want the light skin. I think there needs to be a really deep discussion as to why this individual desires the light skin. In my past conversations with young women under the age of 18, they wanted light skin because they wanted a boy to like them, because they thought they were ugly because they were dark. With the little girl where the boy told her, you've been left in the oven too long, he was a very fair-skinned little boy with curly, sandy brown hair. He was a cute little boy. But he wasn't cute because he was light-skinned. He was just a cute little boy. And he said to the little girl, I like you. You have a nice personality, but you're too dark. You've been left in the oven too long. So it is my belief, and based on studies and research, especially by Dr. Charter, Dr. Hall, and Dr. Neha Mishra, is that there is a desire to be accepted, to be embraced, to feel a sense of belonging, to feel included and not excluded. There is this belief that with a darker skin tone, I'm not as pretty as Dr. Charter. I may not be able to get a boyfriend or a husband or a potential whatever job. There are studies here in the United States that have shown that lighter skinned children in school are treated better and they're not punished as severely as the darker skinned children. So again, I believe that the desire to have fairer skin is one, to compete, two, to be included, because a lot of people with darker skin tones historically are excluded. They're excluded from the mainstream. Another reason can also be that the media in this country, in the United States especially, they glorify lighter skin. We have several actresses who are Black. Let me give you a good example of the young lady, Dr. Shard, if you can remember her name. She is a ballerina, Misty Copeland. She was a brown-skinned Black girl and light brown skin. And she was getting into ballet. And she's done interviews where she noted she wasn't accepted because her skin was brown. And she was light. She wasn't very dark. So she said in a recent interview a few months ago that she found herself wearing the makeup of the white women who were ballerinas so that she could look like them. Because she believed that if she had that white skin, she would be more accepted as a ballerina. And a lot of this goes back to racism, the negative stereotypes, biases from historical roots. Historically, where here, especially in America, white people have white privilege. And that white skin color privilege enabled them to have better opportunities than someone who looked like me. I'm a brown skinned mixed race woman. I am Hispanic and I am Black mixed. So for people who looked like me in the United States, someone with fairer skin would be treated better and have more opportunities than I would have. So that individual says, I'm not accepted. I'm not getting dates. Guys don't look at me. I've had guys, and there've been things on social media. If you ever go to TikTok or even Twitter, well, now it's called X, where you see dark skinned girls being badgered, where they're told you're Black and ugly. Nobody wants you with your dark skin. I would never, and a lot of young Black men in the United States have said this, and which is really terrible, that they don't want to have a dark-skinned girlfriend because they don't want dark-skinned children. They don't want to have children with bad hair, as they call it, meaning kinky hair. They want their children to grow up having it easier in life because of the belief and the obvious that's here in this country and worldwide. The lighter your skin tone, the more favor you are given, the more opportunities for you. So imagine a little girl growing up into a teenager, and she's seen this her entire life. She's had family members say to her, don't go in the sun because you're too dark. There's an old saying in the United States, don't drink coffee or your skin will get dark. My grandmother, who was Hispanic, always told us that, don't drink coffee. If you drink coffee, you're going to get dark. Don't date a dark-skinned man because think of your children. If you fall in love with a man who's dark-skinned, your children may come out dark. I grew up hearing this. It didn't impact me. That's what made me want to dig into colorism. But imagine a little girl whose family members of the community, her peers at school, in the work environment, social circles are always telling her, you're dark. You're not the pretty one. You don't have the favor. You're not a pretty girl. Your life is going to be difficult because you're dark. Then we look at hair systems and how they work. So how do we deal with someone who says, I want to be light skinned? You sit down and you have a heart to heart with them and you show them. And this is where the empathy and the compassion, and this is what humanity is all about. You say to them, you are beautiful. There's nothing wrong with your skin color. Now, that would require, and I'm not a psychologist, so I would try and offer what I could. But if I saw the individual, like the young ladies I have dealt with, I give them referrals to go talk to someone, whether it's psychoanalysis or a therapist, to talk it out. Why do you feel the need to be light-skinned? What do you think having lighter skin will do? How will it enhance your life? Will it make you more accepted member, and I say this in quotes, of society? But the bulk of the time, and if you ever get a chance, look on social media. I urge all of you, go through Twitter, which is now X. Look at TikTok. Look at some of the nasty, negative comments that darker skinned women have to deal with. Look at how there was an issue years ago where they had this thing called Team Light Skin and Team Dark Skin on Twitter, where darker skinned girls were treated terribly because they were dark.
You, ma'am.
Excuse me. And it didn't matter if they were pretty and darker skinned. What mattered is that they were dark. And because of that dark skin color, they were treated negatively. So you have to talk to them. You have to sit down and find the root issue as to why they want to be light. You also have to say to them and alert them to the dangers of these skin lightening products. Dr. Ronald E. Hall, has thoroughly documented how these skin bleaching products can cause kidney damage, how there's mercury in some of the products that they are making in Ghana using compounds and chemicals, and how they resulted in stillbirths for babies and cause severe health issues for the mother. So we need to have these conversations. Another thing I'd like to say, and then I'll end this, I'll stop, I don't want to use it all the time, is to the campaign, this Authentically Me campaign, global campaign, where we are glorifying all skin tones, where we have ads, we have commercials, we have videos, we have seminars and discussions where we have people talking about the beauty of the various hues of skin tones in this country. It's not going to stop until we, the world, members of society, push back on this dogged belief that the lighter you are, the better you are. We have to push back and reject and really go after employers and educational institutions that glorify and treat lighter skinned students better than darker skinned students. A final note is that people have biases, and some of those biases are unconscious. Some people don't even realize colorism can be an unconscious issue. It can be unconscious and it can occur consciously. It can be intentional and unintentional. What we need to work on to deal with this PEP syndrome is to say, let's really have training in the workplace. Let's have training for teachers, professors, medical doctors. In the United States, there are issues where darker skinned people are deemed to be able to deal with more pain than someone who's lighter skinned. A darker skinned person going to the doctor, saying to the doctor, oh my gosh, I have severe back pain. I can barely walk. I'm excruciating pain. despite the diagnostic tests, the x-rays and MRI, showing that this person does have a herniated disc or nerve damage, their pain threshold is going to be deemed, well, you know what? She can deal with the pain. But if a lighter skinned person would go to that same doctor and say, doctor, my back pain, oh my gosh, I can't take it, I'm dying, I can't walk. That lighter skinned person is going to be given a prescription for pain medication, referred to physical therapy. They're going to be given a referral to see another doctor. But there's this belief that darker skin tones can endure more pain. Years ago, historically, there was a doctor whose name I cannot think of, who would perform experiments on Black enslaved women with no anesthesia. They were gynecological experiments where he would actually do surgery on this woman while she was awake. And he did it several times. And there was a belief that because of her dark skin tone and her race, that her pain threshold was not that of a woman who was white or of a lighter skin tone. And you can research this. This is what happens. So we have to change how people think, how people perceive, how people gauge others. My pain, Dr. Sharda can have a bad toothache. I can have a bad toothache. How can you say that Dr. Sharda's toothache pain is much worse than mine when you're looking at an x-ray and that x-ray shows we both have an infection in the root of the tooth, severe infection? But the doctor could say, I'm going to give Dr. Sharda pain pills. And he could say to me, Donnamaria, you're going to be okay. We're just going to give you antibiotics. And you can just take Tylenol for the pain. Do you see the discrimination and the difference? Because of my skin color, I was treated disparately. I was treated differently. So we have to remove the stigma that darker skin can endure more pain. They can be treated any which way they want. We want to treat them. They don't have as much value or worth as a lighter skinned person. We have to go to the medical community. We have to go to our educational institutions, our employment sectors, financial sectors. Here in the United States, there have been issues where darker skinned people are not given mortgages because they're dark. They're rejected for automobile loans, and they could have better credit than a white person or someone with lighter skin tone. So how do we do this? We have to look and include colorism and skin color discrimination in our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Because here in the United States, it's very rare that you're finding the inclusion of skin color discrimination or colorism in any DEI literature. And my goal is to break that mold, to stop that, to write articles, write books, do presentations where I'm saying to the world, stop and listen. And that's what the Authentically Me campaign is about. Stop and listen. Colorism is a diversity issue. Diversity is about embracing people, embracing differences. Equity is making sure we're leveling the playing board so that everybody has an opportunity to be successful or they're treated fairly. When they go to the doctor, when we talk about inclusion, my pain, you're taking my pain as serious as you're taking Dr. Sharda's pain. Until we change our mindsets and the way we look at people of different skin tones, if we don't stop it, it's going to continue. So if you see it in a college classroom, if you see it in the medical field, if you see it in middle school, elementary school, in the workplace, say something, speak on it. If you have lighter skin and you see someone with darker skin tones being treated disparately because they're dark, say something, stand for them, because a lot of times, a lot of people with darker skin tones are afraid to speak up when they're not being treated fairly. We have to change the mindset of all members of society if we're going to eradicate colorism. If we're going to convince people that the color that you are born, your skin tone, there's nothing wrong with you. You're just as welcomed here as someone who's lighter, darker, or medium skin tone. But it's all about changing the mindset. It's all about training your faculty, training your staff at the colleges and universities. I'm, as I noted earlier, a mixed race woman. I've been treated differently, negatively, because of my skin color. So can you imagine? I'm an accomplished woman. I have a doctorate degree. I own several nonprofits, talk radio show. I own a publishing company, the Colorism Project, the Colorism Institute. I'm the founder of the Ronald E. Hall Conference on Colorism. But guess what? I still have to deal with issues. It doesn't matter how accomplished I am. It doesn't matter that I'm Dr. Culbreth. And until we as members of society stop judging people on the color of their skin and judge them based on the content of their character, how are they presenting? What are their characteristics like? This should mean nothing when you're looking at whether you think I'm good enough. And if we don't stop doing it, as Dr. Hall noted, in a couple of years, we're going to have, it's going to get uglier. And I just couldn't imagine it being any uglier than what it is. So we have to change the mindsets. There has to be training. And if we don't start conducting training, I have seen colorism in the classroom. I've seen professors treat lighter skinned students better than darker skinned students. I've seen it. My students have told me. I've seen it in corporate America, where I was a VP in corporate America years ago and I walked away because of the colorism issues, the racism issues. Colorism and racism are cousins. They're related.
Thank you, Dr. Donnamaria, for sharing your valuable expertise with us. It was such an important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.